Hey you guys, welcome back to another one of my videos. If you're new here, my name is Holly and thank you so much for watching. So as always, my earrings are from my beautiful friend Em's company, the Aurora Collective, so make sure to check her out if you want to grab any cute little earrings like these. And she has a whole bunch of other things as well, you know, like bath bombs, chocolates, scrunchies, candles, so go have a look at what she's got. She's just a great little business to support. So the case I wanted to do today is the case of Sarah Cafferkey, and you guys, this is going to be a pretty long video, so grab a snack, grab a drink, grab a coffee, and let's get into it. Sarah, who was born Sarah Louise Cafferkey, was born on the 20th of June 1990 to her parents Ariane Cafferkey and Noelle Dixon. She was born in Bacchus Marsh in Victoria, but she actually lived in Queensland for basically the first 2 years of her life because her family moved there for her dad's job. Sadly though, her parents' relationship didn't go to plan. They actually divorced and her mum moved back to Bacchus Marsh. Although her parents stayed friendly, they obviously didn't have any more kids, and this meant that Sarah was an only child. Bacchus Marsh is a tiny little rural town in Victoria, located about 50 minutes from Melbourne CBD. At the time Sarah grew up there, it was a quiet, safe, family-friendly community surrounded by rolling green hills and farms. Housing, especially at the time, was reasonably cheap too because it is more of a rural area. Like I said before, Sarah was an only child, but she was still surrounded by family and friends growing up. The community of Bacchus Marsh was a really tight-knit community and everyone knew everyone. She also spent a lot of time in Queensland in her younger years visiting her dad, but as she got older she ended up going less because she just wanted to stay in Bacchus Marsh where her friends were. I feel like a lot of kids go through this stage growing up where they just literally want to spend every waking second with their friends. But despite this, she did still see her dad. Instead of her making the trip to Queensland, he just started coming more often to Bacchus Marsh to see her, so they still had a relationship. Sarah from a very young age was described as a very loving person. She was always smiling and seemed so full of life. You guys, if it's not the leaf blowers, there's literally always construction going on in the apartments around me, but I'm just gonna keep pushing through this because I literally cannot be bothered to wait for it to end because it may never end. Sarah went to Koimadai Primary School, which is a very small public school about 10 minutes down the road from Bacchus Marsh. Although the school was small, she did have a lot of very good close friends. Everyone loved Sarah. She was that person that everyone always wanted to be friends with, and she was also really academic. Sarah was a busy child. She did lots of after school activities. One in particular that she did was Little Athletics, which for those of you that aren't Australian, Little Athletics is basically a program where kids aged from about 5 to 16 can go and practice track and field events on a weekly basis, and they will compete against each other, but it's mainly, most people just do it for fun. I believe she also did karate for a little bit, although I can't say for sure. The only reason I think that is because I found a photo, which I'll insert here, of her in a karate outfit, so I'm just taking a stab in the dark. As well as this, she was in the Australian Youth Choir, which I feel like is pretty self-explanatory. It's a choir here in Australia that you can join if you want extra singing practice and support. You do have to audition to get in though, so I feel like Sarah must have been a pretty good singer. She went on to high school at Bacchus Marsh Grammar, which is one of the private high schools in the area. I actually watched a documentary on the case of Sarah before I made this video. It's a really good doco. It's called Wrongly Released, Free to Kill, and on this documentary one of her friends, Ashley, was talking about how they met. She said that they had both started at Bacchus Marsh Grammar in year 7, and there was a school camp really early on in the year, and Ashley said that Sarah walked straight up to her and asked her if she wanted to be in the same room as her for the camp. And I feel like this just shows how friendly Sarah was. She didn't know this Ashley girl, but she was just so confident. There is no way in year 7 that I would have walked up to someone that I didn't know to start a conversation with them. Sarah didn't actually end up completing school here, as in year 11 she transferred to another school called Bacchus Marsh College. This school is government funded, so it's public, and Sarah wanted to finish year 11 and 12 here, but unfortunately things wouldn't go to plan. When Sarah was 15, she was diagnosed with asthma, and I believe it was pretty serious because as well as the asthma, she was diagnosed with acute severe bronchial spasms. I had never heard of this before this video, and to be completely honest, I still don't fully understand what it is, but from my understanding, basically this diagnosis meant that she could get really severe attacks where very quickly she could stop breathing if she didn't go to hospital straight away. And Sarah did have to go to hospital reasonably often because of this diagnosis, and I think it's something that she really struggled with. I can imagine it would be really scary not knowing when these attacks were going to happen, like not knowing whether you're going to have to go to hospital that day. And she didn't really talk about her diagnosis much because it just was something that upset her, and she felt like she was really misunderstood. She missed a lot of school during her last year too, and so it meant that for year 12 Sarah tried to complete her education through the homeschooling system. Although Sarah struggled to get through school, she was by no means lazy. She actually really enjoyed working and was thrilled when she got a job at the local pub known as the Golden Fleece. She had the perfect personality for this sort of job as she was so bubbly and friendly, and her bosses were really impressed by her. In September of 2011, when Sarah had just turned 21, she started dating a new guy by the name of Christopher Stewart. Sarah was really happy. Stewart seemed nice and loving and caring, and Sarah was just over the moon at the thought that this was potentially the person she was going to spend the rest of her life with. Only 2 months in though, things started to go south. Stewart didn't have a great reputation. He was actually known around town as that sort of person that it was probably best to have nothing to do with. He was someone that used drugs, and I believe that he caused a lot of dramas in him and Sarah's relationship too. Stewart also told Sarah that she couldn't see her friends, which is such a red flag. You guys, if anyone that you're ever dating tells you that you can't see your friends or your family, please try and leave if it's safe to do so. Protect yourself, take care of yourself, as this is classic abusive behavior. Around the same time, Sarah told her friend Ashley that she had started smoking marijuana, drinking more and using ecstasy, and her mum Noelle had also noticed that she had started to change. Noelle understandably was really worried about her daughter, and she actually eventually confessed that she was using ice. With her new boyfriend had come a new group of friends, and I believe that most of them, or if not all of them, were quite regular drug users. Despite all of this though, Sarah was well aware that her ice use was a problem, and she spoke about this with her mum and her friends. She tried to detox at home but was unsuccessful, and so she booked herself in to see her doctor to obtain a position at a detox program. In August of 2012, Sarah booked herself into a local detox facility where she stayed for a week. She completed the course and then she graduated. Is that the right word when you finish a course? Like a detox course? Anyway, she finished the course basically, and so she went home. Sarah said she felt great after the detox, and her mum said that she remembers that she was just glowing. Like, she was so happy. She had so many hopes and dreams. She said that she wanted to become a lawyer. She said that she wanted to travel. She said she was excited to get back to being the person, the happy, bubbly person that she was before all of this. Sadly though, by June, Sarah told her mum that she was back to using again. And honestly, you guys, I cannot imagine how hard it would be to try and get sober, especially when you're struggling with an ice addiction. It would be so tough. Around the same time, Sarah ended up breaking up with her boyfriend. She really wanted to get sober and be happy and healthy, and Stewart was just not supportive of this at all. Our friend Stewart though did not take the breakup well. They'd broken up a few times before, but Sarah was just, it seems, so serious about getting sober, and I think that Stewart knew that this time was going to be the final time that they broke up. And so one day, not long after the breakup, Sarah was working and her ex had organized for a man to come to her work and scare her, and this man was called Stephen Hunter. Stephen was about 47 when he went to scare Sarah, and can I just say, Sarah and her ex-boyfriend were in their early 20s, and so I don't know why this Stephen man felt like he needed to get involved, But anyways, Sarah knew of Stephen though. She knew who he was, and she was really scared because he had a bad reputation. She didn't know everything about his past, which is an important piece of information for later on, but in the end, Sarah befriended Stephen and they started hanging out. They would hang out every now and again, and as Stephen was so much older than Sarah, he almost became like a father figure to her. Her dad lived all the way in Queensland, so I can kind of see how this may have happened. Although I guess the father-daughter type relationship was different to most, as the main thing they would do together was drink and consume ice. And not the type you put in your freezer. On Wednesday, the 7th of November 2012, Sarah and one of her female friends stayed at Stephen's unit on Simpson Street in Bacchus Marsh. Stephen was also there and they all drank and consumed ice and GHB. Sarah left his house Thursday morning and they continued to talk over text Thursday afternoon, Friday and Saturday morning before Sarah returned to his house again. That Saturday morning, she'd gone to the bottle shop to get alcohol, and then she made her way to his Bacchus Marsh home. On Friday the 9th of November, so the day before Sarah had made her way to Stephen's house, her mum Noelle was at home with her daughter. Noelle was kind of surprised that Sarah was there, as she was such a social person who usually went out on Fridays, but for whatever reason Sarah had decided to stay in that night. Noelle on the other hand had plans, so she got ready, she said goodbye to Sarah and just asked her to clean up after herself, and she left. Noelle didn't see Sarah when she returned, and she didn't see her that Saturday or that Sunday either, and so by Monday Noelle was actually starting to get really concerned. She called Sarah but got no answer. She also called a few of Sarah's friends who were equally surprised to hear that Sarah hadn't been home in a few days. Her car, a silver Holden Astra, was also missing, and so by Monday afternoon Noelle decided to call the police. This case actually got quite a bit of coverage as a missing persons case. I believe by Tuesday there were news stations covering her disappearance on TV. Also, coincidentally, that Tuesday, which was the 13th of November, was actually the day that Sarah was meant to go back into the detox program, but obviously that didn't happen. Police started looking into the people around Sarah that she knew well to try and get to the bottom of what was happening and where she was. Their first suspect was, of course, Christopher Stewart, Sarah's ex, but he was actually cleared pretty quickly, and I'm not sure what the circumstances were around why he was cleared, but all I know is that he was cleared pretty quickly. Police were also quite suspicious of Stephen Hunter from pretty much the beginning of the investigation, as he was a suspected drug dealer, and also a few of Sarah's friends had mentioned his name as being one of the last people to be with her, and so police actually wasted no time trying to contact him. They sent him a text message on Monday night telling him to contact them in relation to the missing persons case of Sarah Cafferkey. And the next day, which was Tuesday the 13th, Stephen actually spoke to police via phone. He told them that yes, he had seen Sarah at his house on Saturday night, but he actually left to stay at his other house, which I haven't actually mentioned yet, but Stephen had another residence that he would stay at quite often, which was just down the road in another suburb called Point Cook. But he said that she'd been at his house when he left her, but when he returned to the Bacchus Marsh house 2 days later, she wasn't there. I believe in the next few days, police had walked around the outside of Stephen's premises a few times, just checking things out, seeing if there was anything suspicious, but they hadn't really found anything. But on the 15th of November, police received information that Sarah's missing Holden Astra had been found. It was parked on Owen Street in Marybyrnong. I feel like I said that wrong, I'm so sorry. But this suburb is about 40 minutes from Bacchus Marsh in more central Melbourne. Although this was nowhere near where Stephen lived, police were still very suspicious of him, and the following day they actually ended up seizing his car too. And on November 17th, police obtained a search warrant to search the inside of Stephen's Bacchus Marsh residence. The homicide squad, once inside, could see that some sort of serious assault had taken place inside that unit. Investigators also went to Stephen's Point Cook residence, and when they got there, they noted pretty much straight away that one of Stephen's green bins smelt really awful. The bin smelled like death or decay, and as well as this, they actually found blood splatters on the floor and on a ladder next to the bin. They found empty bags of quick setting concrete and a container of acid. So as I'm sure you guys will agree, Stephen Hunter was looking very sus at this point. Oh, and something that I didn't mention is the concrete bags were empty because the concrete was in the bin. On the 18th of November, the wheelie bin was taken to the Victorian Institute of Forensic Medicine to get a CT scan. Police could see that the bin was packed with concrete, so obviously wanted to get an x-ray to see what else, if anything else, was in there. And sadly, the x-ray showed the body of an adult inside the bottom part of the bin. So on Tuesday, the 20th of November 2012, Stephen Hunter was arrested and charged with the murder of Sarah Cafferkey. This was only 11 days after his parole period had ended for previous charges. At first, when police started interviewing Stephen, he of course denied any involvement, but he came around pretty quick and did eventually admit to the murder. We will never know if the version of events Stephen gave is 100% correct, but this is basically what the police think happened. So Sarah made her way over to Stephen's house on that Saturday, where they were consuming drugs and drinking alcohol. While Sarah was there, she believed that Stephen had made a comment about her being a junkie. Stephen claims that this comment was made about someone else and Sarah misheard, but either way, it really upset Sarah. They started to have an argument, and according to Stephen, Sarah actually pushed him. Stephen lost his balance, and in a fit of rage, he started to bash her head in with a hammer. He hit her multiple times with this hammer, and as well as this, he started stabbing her. She was stabbed in her aorta, left carotid artery, lungs, and liver. Because of all the trauma that Sarah's body went through, she passed away that Saturday night. Saturday, November 10th, 2012 is the day that Sarah took her last breath. It didn't take Stephen long to start his attempt to cover up for this murder. At 7 p.m. that night, he'd called a friend and asked them to come over because he'd locked himself out and the friend had his keys. When the friend got there, Stephen said, "I don't know what I've done." And the friend just assumed that he was talking about them, as they had had a really big fight not long before. And so this friend just said he wanted nothing to do with Stephen and he left. That night, Stephen went out to a friend's house for a party. Sarah's body was on his kitchen floor and he just left it there. I feel like you have to be a really messed up person to firstly murder someone and then leave their body on your kitchen floor so you can go out and sesh. I feel like this speaks volumes to the sort of person that Stephen was. 2 days later is when Noelle, Sarah's mum, contacted police, and then police contacted Stephen, which is what prompted him to remove her body from the kitchen floor. He wrapped her body in a bag and put it in his car, and he then drove to a friend's house. Let's call this friend Timmy. Stephen told Tim that he had a body of a woman in his car that someone else had killed at his house party, and he asked Tim if he would help him dispose of the body, preferably at Timmy's family's property. Timmy said no way, but then proceeded to go and get food with Stephen and then go to Bunnings with him, where Stephen bought a 20-litre container of hydrochloric acid, 3 bags of rapid set concrete, 1 bag of lime, and a roll of plastic black wrap. Timmy then decided that he had had enough, and he told Stephen that he wouldn't help him any further. On the 13th of November, Stephen drives to his house at Point Cook. Here he removes Sarah's body from the back of the car and puts her in a wheelie bin. He then pours concrete on top of her. In the early hours of November 14th is when Stephen drives back to his residence at Bacchus Marsh to get Sarah's car and drop it in Maribyrnong, where police locate it the next day. And it wasn't long after this, on the 20th, when Stephen was arrested. I wanted to pause here to quickly talk a bit more about Stephen and his past. Like I said before, Stephen had a bad reputation, but after the murder of Sarah, it became very clear that even the Bacchus Marsh police weren't actually aware of the extent of Stephen's past. He'd grown up in an abusive household as a child. He was burnt with an iron and degraded for bedwetting. One time, Stephen and his 2 siblings had been locked in a room by his dad, and Stephen actually escaped this to find his mother tied to a chair with his dad holding a gun in her mouth. He called his grandparents for help, and his mum must have survived this event, but I think it's important to include this as I feel like it gives us a better understanding of why he turned out the way he did. He was known to police from a very young age. When he was only 17 in 1983, he was charged with assault and carrying a weapon. In 1986, when Stephen was only 20, he was working with an 18-year-old lady by the name of Jacqueline Matthews at a supermarket in the suburb of Moonee Ponds in Melbourne. Stephen really liked this lady and tried to ask her out, but for whatever reasons she declined. She just wasn't interested, and Stephen couldn't take the rejection, and so he murdered her. Literally ended her life because she didn't want to date him. After he did it, he burned her body, but he pleaded not guilty in court. And although the court found him guilty of murder, he was sentenced to 16 years with a non-parole period of 13 years. This meant that in December of 2000, Stephen was released on parole. He was literally free and roaming the streets once again, and he was only 35. It just blows my mind that he was so young and already free from prison for a murder. Can you imagine how Jacqueline's family must have felt knowing that this murderer was free? He had actually also escaped from prison when he was locked up for that murder, and he basically just got a slap on the wrist for this. In 2005, Stephen was in court again, this time for theft, intentionally causing an injury, trafficking a drug of dependence, and kidnapping. This man just does not learn. In 2006, he was sentenced to 6 years with a non-parole period of 4 years. And can you guess when he was released? Yep, after 4 years and a few months, Stephen was back on the street. I believe one of the reasons he moved to Bacchus Marsh was because no one knew who he was. And on top of this, one of his friends there helped him get a job doing work on the roads. He was also a drug dealer on the side, which is how he connected with Sarah's boyfriend, and then Sarah after that. The people around him knew he had had a violent past, but I really think the people of Bacchus Marsh didn't fully understand the extent of that. He was on parole when he was released, which would expire on the 30th of October 2012, and that date was only a week before he would end up murdering Sarah. The man really slipped through the cracks of the criminal justice system. Stephen Hunter was sentenced on the 21st of August 2013 to life in prison with no parole. Normally when someone pleads guilty to a murder, even though they have murdered someone, they normally get the chance of having a parole, but Stephen, because of his past, he didn't get this chance, and he didn't deserve this chance. This case though really highlighted the flaws of the parole system in Victoria. Stephen Hunter had demonstrated previously that he was a seriously violent person, and so he should have never been allowed to be released from prison on parole. Around this time, the parole system was actually reviewed in Victoria, and the review found that the system was flawed, and I believe now there is a lot more pressure on a parole board to really accurately give people firstly enough time to assess them properly and just really look at each case individually. But with that, you guys, I come to the end of this video. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope that you found this one interesting. It's such a sad case because he really shouldn't have been out of prison when Sarah met him, you know, like, and if she hadn't have met him, she would still be living. I'm gonna link below the documentary if I can, and also the court documents that I used to base this case off, and I'm also going to link a few domestic violence websites down below for you guys as well. I actually don't normally talk about my Instagram either, but I always link my Instagram below, so you guys are more than welcome to follow me on there. Send me a message telling me you came from YouTube and I'll follow you back. But that is everything I have to say on this case. I hope that you guys are having a wonderful day wherever you are, and I hope that I will see you in my next one. Bye, you guys.